Welcome to the Reinvent Your Life podcast, the show that talks about why we do what we do and how we can do it better.
Welcome to the Reinvent Your Life podcast. My name is Chaz Molesky, and today we're going to talk about what makes something impossible. You hear the term, that's impossible, or there's no way you can do that, right? It's impossible. And every time we say this, we cut off the possibility of anything actually coming about of it, right? We just accept this knowledge or this story that it is incapable of being accomplished. That's impossible. Move on. Find the next thing. And we settle at impossible. But we put a lot of limits and we put a lot of restraints on the things that actually are possible for us and what we can do with that strength and with that knowledge of what we can actually accomplish. Because it's all going to come down to belief, and it's all going to come down to how much work we really put into achieving something. But ultimately, on top of it, we have to understand, why is it considered impossible in the first place? Is it truly something that's impossible, or are we accepting the belief that it's impossible because it's just really hard, or you don't know how to get there, or it's going to take a lot of effort? See, sometimes we confuse our own definitions for what's possible and what's not, and what we're capable of and what we're not, because we tell ourselves this story over and over again that we can't do something, or we have never done it before in the past, so how can we do it now? And we get caught in these loops. And when we get caught in these loops, the thing that starts to happen is we start to lose a lot of faith and belief in ourselves, but also what's possible for our lives. So we start creating impossibilities out of very realistically possible situations. So the first thing that we do, and I alluded to this a couple seconds ago, but for what's creating this frame of impossibility, the first thing that we do is we tell ourselves stories about changes that can't happen and why those changes can't happen, right? So we might find ourselves in a situation in our life, we're in a cushy, comfy job. We've been in it for 15 years. We're in a relationship that's no longer serving. It's no longer fulfilling us, but we stay in it for X amount of years longer than we know we should have. But we do it because it's just so hard to get out there and find someone new, or there's kids involved, or there's all these other things that are going on. We tell ourselves a story of why we can't have that really nice house down the road. We say, well, I don't make enough money to afford that. There's no way we'll be able to be in there. It's going to go to waste. We come up with these stories, and a lot of times the stories we make are just discounting our dreams. And they're just putting us in a position where we can rationalize and we can make sense of why we're not going to go through the hardships that would be required to get that thing that we want, or that thing that we believe that we want. So we tell ourselves these stories about why this change cannot happen, why it's not going to happen, and if it did happen, what's going to happen to us then? And we generate these stories, and most of the time, the stories we tell ourselves are very uninspiring. They're very unempowering, and they don't really motivate us to change. They don't push us in that direction because they're keeping us safe. We do this to keep ourselves safe. See, we will stay as safe as possible in our life because that's our comfort zone. That's what we know best. That's what we know the most of. So we're used to it. We know what to expect. We're an expert in that zone, right? But when we step out of that, that's when the work has to happen, right? That's when the fear creeps in. That's when the things start happening that make you feel so uncomfortable, so nervous, so unsure of yourself. That's the tough thing, right? That's the hard part to push through. So we talk about these stories so that we can mitigate those feelings of fear or anxiety. So we don't have to put ourselves in those situations. But the only solution to fixing this is to change your story about what you want and change what the story is doing for you. So instead of saying, if you're stuck in a job that you hate, but you've been in it for so long and you're just coming up for retirement in 10 years, 8 years, whatever it is, the story that you tell yourself, if you tell yourself, well, I only have 8 years left, I just have to suffer through this. Okay, well, there's your story, right? I'm suffering because I have 8 years left, I'm going to be retiring. Okay, fine. Or that story can be flipped into, well, if I'm going to be here for the next 8 years, then I'm going to find a way to enjoy every single day that I'm here in some way. Even if it's just for 5 minutes, I'm going to find a way to do that. And the reason I'm doing that is because I know at the end of those 8 years, I'll be coming off a high. I'll be feeling really good. I will have found a way to find happiness in each day, even in the worst situations. See, that's a more empowering story. So we have to change the story about our circumstances if we're not going to change the circumstance itself. All right. So that's the first section. The second section of this, the second piece that goes into recreating this frame, right? This mindset of possibility. The second thing is what we tell ourselves. All right, so the words that we choose to describe situations. I mean, impossible alone is a word that is very negative, and it's going to shut off any opportunity. There's other words that we choose to use that are worse than other words that we can be picking that are going to really fuel some motivation, or it's going to cripple us into self-doubt. Right? So if we're really looking at situations, oh, that's going to be really hard. Well, as soon as you tell yourself those words, oh, that's going to be very hard, your mind is beginning to shift itself to anticipate how difficult this is going to be. So you're putting yourself already at a disadvantage by saying this is going to be X, this is going to be Y, especially if it's negative or it's something that you're going to have to overcome. It's going to pull you out of your comfort zone. So be very mindful when you're talking about situations or things that you want to accomplish. What is the language that you're using? Are you using language that would typically dissuade somebody from doing something? That's really hard. That's going to be frustrating. You'll never get to sleep. You'll never get to see your kids. You're going to be so busy. You could fail, right? There's so many things that you could say, these words that you could choose. Whereas in the same instance, even if you wanted to use that word, yeah, this is going to be very difficult, but I'm going to do everything I can to figure it out. See, when we tell ourselves that, we start talking in that mindset, right? In that way, we're now creating possibility. We're telling ourselves, yeah, it is going to be hard, but guess what? We're going to figure it out and we're going to make it happen. And you're putting your mindset into a state of determination, not discouragement. So be very mindful and be very careful with the words that you're choosing to use and the things that you're telling yourself. So you have to learn to change your language. And an easy way you can do this is just spend a day using yourself as an experiment and just see the words that you say. Pay attention to how you speak. A lot of us just go through our lives and we just have conversations. I mean, I did this for the longest time. I would be so negative and I wouldn't even recognize it. So when you do this and you have these conversations, pay attention. What are the words you're using? How are you describing things? A simple exercise is when people ask you, how are you feeling? Or how did you like that movie? Or what do you think about this? And you just consistently use words like, good, it's okay, it was all right. When you say words like that with that same inflection, right? That's making it so you don't have to commit to an answer. It's making it very easy for you to just say, yeah, good is good, which means somebody could do really well, they could do kind of bad. But if I'm good, and I'm just right in the middle. Middle is safe. That's where I like to be. Or it was okay. Okay could be good or bad, but once again, we're in the middle, right? So the more you stay in the middle with your language, the more you're just flatline with the way you describe situations and the way you talk, chances are your life is probably very similar. You're probably riding the same comfortable line for multiple years now, right? And you might want to change and you might want to do other things, but you find excuses for why you won't do them. Or you'll discount any of your successes. You won't take any compliments because you don't want to rise too high. You want to stay in your little comfort line, that very short, shallow, even-keeled, it's all right, it's okay, it was good. When we stay right in there and we don't put emotion into the things that we tell ourselves, it's very hard for us to get inspired or to have a real true opinion that we trust because we're just trying to stay even-keeled. So the second thing we have to do is we have to change what we tell ourselves. All right? And now finally, the third thing that we have to do for ourselves, now this is the hardest one. This is putting pressure, this is putting leverage on us. If we really truly want to change, if we're facing something we believe is impossible and we want to break through to that next level, if we want to get rid of that belief that something is impossible, we have to establish and figure out what we're doing to prevent ourselves from getting there. And so this means most of the time, if we're really stuck and we're not making any movement, we've made a double bind for ourselves. Now, a double bind is very challenging to get out of because it's going to take a lot of belief reframe. You are going to have to do some work on yourself and really think about, what do I truly 100% believe in and which direction do I want to go with that? Because in a double bind, what we do is we associate pain to getting what we want. So if we want that new job, if we want a different relationship, if we want to move to a new house, we put a whole bunch of pain in front of that, which is saying, yeah, but it's going to be so expensive. Oh, but it's going to be so emotionally painful to get there. Oh, but you've worked so long here. You can't give that up. You'll feel like a failure. right? When we get into that, we have so much pain towards getting what we want that we're going to stay the same. But guess what? You've also created pain if you don't change. So where you are currently, yeah, but I hate my job. I hate everything about this, right? I'm so unfulfilled in my relationship. It's practically like I'm roommates. When we get into that mindset and we're stuck in a pain if I do, pain if I don't situation, we don't do anything. And all we do is suffer. That is the consistent pattern I see in every single person that is stuck in a double bind situation, is that they don't find any success in getting what they want, and they don't find any success in being where they are. So they sit in their current state. They feel powerless. They feel hopeless, and they just give up. So in order to get out of the double bind, you have to recognize what you're doing in this situation. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll bargain or we'll make concessions for our situation. Yeah, it's not where I want to be, but you know what? It could be a lot worse. I have it better than most people. I'm not really sure that I would even want that anyway. Grass is greener on the other side. See, we start to make these concessions and we start to bargain with ourselves and try to convince ourselves that even though we don't love where we are, it's still better than where we might end up in the worst case scenario. And so we convince ourselves to stay stuck in suffering. We push harder sometimes, right? When we're stuck in this double bind, it's like, you know what? Nothing's working the way I'm doing it right now, but you know what? I'm just going to work a little bit harder at it. I'm going to push even harder. Even though this stuff I've been doing isn't working, right? I'm trying to change my life, but it's just not working. I'm going to do more of the things that aren't working instead of taking a step back and figuring out, what am I doing that's creating this situation for me? What am I doing in my life that's preventing me from making any real change or any real growth? We have to evaluate this. We have to really analyze what we're doing to ourselves. And then finally, the last thing we do, and I kind of alluded to this, we abstain. So which means we just don't do anything. We hide from our friends. We hide from our family. We just stay inside. We get depressed. We don't do anything because we feel so hopeless. It's almost like, what's the point, right? I'm always going to be miserable. I'm never going to feel alive. I'm going to be stuck in this situation where every day I wake up, I got to go through the same routine every day I go to bed, and I'm miserable, and I never know what's going to change, and I just feel hopeless, right? We get stuck in that mindset. We get stuck in that situation because we stay so far away from everything. We shield ourselves because we don't want to admit that. We don't want people to see that as a weakness in us. We don't want people to know that we're hurting or we're suffering or we're needing help. We don't want to seem weak, when in reality, sometimes what we need to do, especially in this situation, if you find yourself in a double bind, is put yourself head first into something. Get involved, get your brain involved, get motivated to do something. Even if it's just the smallest little bit, right? The smallest little push to get you moving forward could be enough to create massive lasting change in your life. But if you never put your foot forward and try something, you're never going to experience it. So in those three, bargaining and making concessions, pushing through harder for the things that aren't working, and abstaining from just being a part of civilization and community are three ways, and there's multiple, right? But there's three ways right then and there that you can evaluate right now. How often do you do this, and how often does it keep you from having and getting what you want? So listen, the solution to all of this, if you need a bigger frame of possibility, if you need to believe that something that you once believed was impossible is now possible, you need to find a greater pain or pleasure, and you have to have them become intensely associated to the current pain that you're in and where you staying are. Because what you need to do is you need to get pleasure, massive, massive pleasure associated with getting the thing that you want, because it has to create a bigger pain for you to stay where you are than getting that thing that you want. And the way that you do that is you have to paint the vision of your future. You have to envision what that looks like, what it's going to feel like, how it's going to be when you finally have it. And when you're in that situation, then you'll start to believe, because you're putting yourself in the mindset to achieve it, to attain it. Now, you're still going to have to do the work, but you're seeing it as a possibility instead of an impossibility. So listen, the new pleasure that you get, right? Or the pain that you're going to put on yourselves to motivate yourself forward, it has to be greater than the sum of both of your binds, which means damned if you do, damned if you don't. There's going to be some intensity there. But if you can amplify what you want, the thing that you want, and make the pain of not getting that worse than the pain of the damned if you do, damned if you don't. When you can do that, you will make massive, amazing changes every single time, because it's going to be more painful for you to stay stuck and to sit where you are and do nothing than it is to pursue that which you're burning with passion for. But in order to get to that point, you have to determine what you want. And as I always say, go back a couple episodes, listen, all right? Listen to the lessons that I've been giving you. It's all framing you to get to this point, to do what you need to do. But if you don't listen to them and you don't apply the knowledge, you're not going to get there. All right. So take this forward. Start evaluating your own patterns of thinking, what you tell yourself every day, the stories that you tell yourself, any double binds you find yourself in any situations. Evaluate this for yourself. Bring it to face value and start breaking them down. Why do you do it? What is it you're so afraid of? Are you really afraid of that? Or is it something bigger that you're afraid of losing or something you're afraid of gaining? You have to figure this stuff out, because once you can identify little pieces here and there, it makes it so much easier to work on them, because you can pick and choose. You can find them. But when you have to overhaul your entire self and your entire mind, well, it's overwhelming. It's impossible. That is something that is impossible, to do it all at once, because there's so much going on up there. Pick one thing, work on it, then move to the next one. So we need to create possibilities in our life, and we need to create a mindset of possibility, especially when we believe things to be impossible. Now, you will grow and you will contribute beyond anything you've ever done if you can learn to accept this and implement this into your life. But if you just listen and you don't do anything, well, you'll get more of the same. So as always, please share this. Subscribe to my channels, YouTube, Facebook, at Rise Above Life Coaching. If you need to reach out to me, if you got questions or you want to talk about more things, you have suggestions for the podcast, Chaz at riseabovelifecoaching.com. Send me an email. And as
Thanks
always,
for listening to the Reinvent Your Life podcast. Now go out and apply what you just heard to start your reinvention. Please subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with those that need it most.